Good day everyone and welcome to the first video for database design using MySQL and XAMPP. So today what we're going to go through is just some basic information that you need to know before we start learning about database design, looking at ERDs and more complex things. So over here I've just got an example that I'll go through a bit later on in this video, but for now I want to focus on the right hand side. So when creating databases, the things that we work with is data itself, which is just raw facts, as you can see here. So raw facts are things that we can't really determine anything off, just like, for example, someone's name. Just here we've got John Doe, and then an email. These are individual bits of data that are just raw facts. That's John's first name, last name, and his email. Now, we've got fields as well in our tables, which are these particular columns up here. So they just describe what's in the column heading down this way. And then we've got our rows, which are our records, which this is a full record in a database, particularly a relational database design. So in a relational database design, what we do is we get a bunch of entities. For example, this might be an employee table, and we might have an employee that works for a particular company. So a company might be another table, and then we might have the employee's salary, which is another table. That's just a very, very basic sort of design. So what we're doing is we're splitting up a business into its entities, and then we are from there developing a database design that then helps us use that information in the way that the business intends to. So in MySQL and XAMPP database designs, it literally will look like this. You'll have a bunch of tables that denotes each entity, and then it'll have a bunch of information for each table. So for example, an employee table might have a user ID, first name, last name, and email. The company might have a company ID, name, location, and address. But this is just basic information and terminology that you might need to know before heading into the more complex things. All right, so as we head across to this side, there are a couple of things that I want to sort of raise when developing database. There's a thing called anomalies, and anomalies are seen through database design, and this is where we see issues when inserting, deleting, and updating particular types of information. And this is why it's very important to understand how to develop a proper table in a database and how it all works. So as you can see here, it says that an insertion anomaly is addition of a new agent. So sorry, this is just a previous example that I had. But basically what it would mean that if I inserted something into this table, just say I wanted to insert a customer only, I would then also have to insert product information, even though the particular customer may have not ordered any products yet. So therefore, these tables should be separate. The product should have its own product table, and the customer should have its own customer table. So that's an insertion anomaly, just an example. Okay, we've got deletion anomalies. So now if we delete a product, we lose values in this row, but still hold this customer information. Okay, and then we have an update anomaly, where if we're updating a particular product, we have to update it for each customer. So if we update the laptop here, it'll affect the values here in the customer table. And here's an example here. We're saying that if we update an agent's phone number, we would require updating in more than one entry. So for example, very similar here, if we update a laptop and then someone down here has a laptop as well, we would have to be updating both them columns with the different product prices. Whereas if we had the table split, we'd have our product table over here and then our customer table over here. So it's just very basic information that you need to know. So if I could go through an example of what a basic sort of database design looks like in MySQL, it would be something like this. I'm just going to get rid of this information here. So what you would have is you would have your, I'll just go for a square. So you'd have your entities being your employees, your, just say for example, your company, and then your employee salary details. This is just a basic example. And how this would work, these particular types of entities would have some sort of relationship with each other. So we might have so just say this is the employee table that holds the employee's information. They work for a particular company that's over here. And this employee here has a particular job type and salary. So this might be job details. Okay, this is sort of how it'll work. And the reason a company might want a particular database design is to simplify the process for, could be a payroll process where they just want to each employee to have a particular job description with a particular salary, so they can sort of automate this process and keep it simple. And when the job description or the job detail changes, it changes for each employee that is linked in with that. And then so in these tables, they'll have their own attributes. And as we sort of went through before, each attribute is these columns here that are in the table. So for example, an employee will have an order ID, a employee name, first name, last name, an address, and then potentially where they work. And a job title might have something like a job ID, description, and salary. And a company might have, company ID, name, and description. Okay, so now when we head over to here, what we can see is that we've got an example here. Now, this is business rules. Now, what business rules are, they are particular details that we obtain from a business that allows us to have a basic understanding of what they're actually creating the database for. So I'll just read this one out to you and then we'll go through it, and I'll explain things like primary keys, foreign keys, and then the attributes and how we link all this together. So here we've got a real estate firm, lists property for sale, has several sales offices. The following business rules describe this firm. So it says each sales office employs one or more employees, and an employee must be employed in one and only one sales office. The sales office lists property for sale. Each unit of property must be listed with one and only one of the sales offices. So a sales office may have a number of properties listed or may have no properties listed. So as you can see here, I've got the steps that we need to go through to create a thing called an ERD. Now this is an entity relationship diagram. And the reason we do this is to develop something like this so we can get a basic understanding of how the particular entities have a relationship with one another. Okay? So what I'll do is I'll get rid of this and we'll start working through this. I'm just going to start straight from these examples so that we can get an understanding of how this works. So here first we have one of the first entities, which is the sales office. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll put some text in here. Sales office. So that's one entity that we have. So that becomes basically a table that we can use in our database design. Then we have employees, which is another. So I'm just going to copy and paste that over here. I'll put it underneath. So employees. Or employee. So an employee must be employed in one or more sales offices, that's fine. And then we have the sales office list property. So property is another entity. So now, I don't know if I described this before, but an entity is a noun. It's something that's specific, like a person, place, or thing. So this is a property. So that is another entity. So when you're looking for entities, think of person, place, or thing, like a noun. Okay, so property up here. Now it's saying each unit of property must be listed with one and only one of the sales offices and a sales office. So this is just describing the relationships that they have. So if we just go and link these together for now, without worrying about anything too complex, what we can say is that a sales office employs one or more employees. So this sales office has a relationship with the employee. Now it says here that an employee must be employed in one and only one sales office. So we've already denoted that relationship there. The sales office lists properties for sale. Okay, so the sales office lists properties for sale. Okay, so the relationships are described by doing words, so verbs. Okay, so what we can say here is the sales office employees. This is what we normally do. We normally put the particular word here, or the verb to denote the relationship. And then same up here, we say sales office lists. So you can say lists property. So we're describing this type of relationship. Okay, without worrying about the attributes for now, this is just the general sort of relationship that we have going on here. The sales office has a relationship with the property, and the sales office also has a relationship with the employee. Okay, so now what we can start looking at is the attributes, and as I described before, the attributes are the things that we would actually put in the table. So for example, an employee, what would an employee have? So an employee would probably have some sort of employee ID. So we'll just list these things down now. So to have an employee ID, they might have a first name, a last name, and let's just go a job description. So this is just auto correcting it for me, but you understand where I'm going with this. Okay, so these are the attributes that this particular table would have. Something like that. Okay. Now the table up here in the sales office, what things would we have? Probably have a sales office ID, probably a name, and then a particular location for the sales office. So what I'll do there is I'll copy this across and I'll just change these roughly. So I'll go sales ID, we can say name, and then location. Okay. So those are the attributes for the sales office. And then for the property, we'll probably have a property ID. We'd have a name and location of the property, which is pretty straightforward. Okay, so this is a very basic entity relationship diagram. So this is just describing the relationships and the attributes that would be in each table. Now, when we look at this, the way this would actually be laid out is in a table that we've seen previously. So for example, if I come across this side, it would be something like this in the table. Okay, so the employee would have the employee ID as a column, their name, their first and last name like this, and then their job description at the end, or their job description ID. So it'd actually look like this if we were storing the information in the database. Now for each particular entity that we have, we need to have a thing called entity integrity. And what that means is that for each table, we have some sort of ID or what we call a primary key, which is an attribute that denotes each table. So for example, if I type in 1 and I'm searching for user ID 1, I can see that user ID 1 belongs to John. Okay. This is good because it means that I can search any user ID and I can find one value that's returned. If user ID 1 is for multiple people, then there's no entity integrity, meaning that there's no, if I search 1, I'm going to get multiple values back for the user ID. Okay, so that's normally why over here I'm using sales ID, employee ID, and property ID, because each one might start at 1 and work its way up to whatever number for whatever amount of sales offices there are, or properties, or employees. Okay, so each one will have an individual row. So when we look up data in a table, we might use an ID that we can search to quickly look up all the information about that particular user ID or person. So using something like an employee ID is very important. Okay, so this is just a basic outline of how we build these sort of relationships. Okay, so in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the connectivity and the participation and what that actually means. And then that'll lead on to when we use foreign keys. So foreign keys are something that allows us to link these tables together in a database design. So thank you for watching today's video. You can go through, I'll put up a couple of questions below of basic explanations, and then all that, if you'd want to do, we'll just go through and just do something like this. You can do it on pen and paper, just draw up the entities, and then just some attributes that you might think are relevant in there, and just think, how could I identify this particular attribute? And most of the time you'll be using some sort of ID. All right, thank you.